Hello, this is Claus Jensen presenting my first ever Garry Kasparov video. This game is from the Super Tournament Linares in 1994, which by the way saw one of the most impressive tournament victories in the history of chess, as Anatoly Karpov won the event scoring an amazing 11 out of 13 points. Kasparov and Shirov ended second with 8.5 points, and then came Bareev, Kramnik, Lotier, Anand, Kamsky, Topalov, Ivanchuk, Gelfand, Iliescas, Polgar and Belyavsky. Indeed a very, very strong tournament and very impressive performance by Karpov. But we should not talk about Karpov. Let's look at the game from this tournament, the game Kasparov against Ivanchuk. And Kasparov is playing the white pieces, and we are off with d4, knight f6, c4, c6, knight c3, d5, the Slav defense, knight f3, e6, bishop g5, d takes c4, e4, b5, and now e5 is leading to a very sharp theory line, h6, bishop h4, g5, knight takes g5, h takes, bishop takes, knight b d7, e takes f6, bishop b7, g3, c5, d5, knight takes f6 and bishop g2. And up until this move we are still in theory, and both players have played fairly quickly, but now Ivanchuk didn't play the mainline move, which is bishop e7 in this position. He did instead play bishop h6, and that made Kasparov think for more than 40 minutes, in fact. First thing he had to consider was whether to exchange his bishop for Ivanchuk's bishop or for his knight. And Kasparov decided to exchange it for Ivanchuk's knight, so he played bishop takes f6, queen takes, Kasparov castled, and Ivanchuk castled queenside, knight takes b5, e takes d5, knight takes a7 with check, king b8, knight b5. And after this crazy theory opening line, we can say that Kasparov probably has a slight advantage. And he has so primarily because of his king safety. There are of course open lines against Kasparov's king, but he has a protection of his pawns and this bishop, while when we look at the Ivanchuk's king, it's very exposed. No pawns to defend it, and only a bishop at this point. So, what we shall see in this game is that both players fight an open battle where both sides do all they can to mate their opponent king. And this is what makes this game very interesting. Ivanchuk played bishop g7 here, a4 followed, queen h6 eyeing the h2 square, which would lead to a checkmate, so h4 is more or less forced. Bishop f6, and now it's clear that Ivanchuk intends bishop takes h4 to open up the king position with brute force. But that doesn't impress Kasparov too much. He plays the very cool queen e1, and then Ivanchuk starts breaking up Kasparov's king position by taking on h4. Kasparov could have taken the bishop here, but after queen takes and queen e5 check, covering the mate on h2, it's still giving Ivanchuk some counterplay because the g file is now open as well. So I think what Kasparov planned when he played queen e1 and what he did actually play was queen a5 here. So he says that while Ivanchuk attacks with all that he's got, I think it's time for my queen to attack Ivanchuk's king as well. So this is now open battle on both sides of the board. Bishop e7, threatening queen h2 checkmate, queen c7 check, king a8, queen a5 check, king b8, queen c7 check, king a8. It's not that Kasparov wants a draw here. He either teased Ivanchuk a little or simply won a couple of moves on the clock. I don't know. But now he plays rook f to e1. This is of course making space for the king, so there's no checkmate on h2, and it's also bringing his rook into the attack. Bishop d6, queen b6, and bishop b8. Ivanchuk cleverly tries to use both his bishops to help his exposed king, and at the same time he's opening up for the possibility of exchanging queens. And Kasparov allows this exchange of queens, but not at any cost. So he plays a5, protecting the queen, and now queen takes b6 would fail to a takes b6, bishop a7, rook takes a7, king b8, rook e7, and Ivanchuk would be mated very soon, so of course he cannot exchange queens. Instead he played rook d7, preventing Kasparov from playing rook to e7. And it's clear that Kasparov has a very promising attack going, but how should he continue from here? It's actually not that easy to see how to progress. But in the game, Kasparov found a very beautiful move, and if you want to give yourself a shot at finding the move, you should pause the video now and see if you can find it. I'll show you the move in just a few seconds. And what Kasparov came up with here is the fantastic move rook e8. The immediate threat with this move is queen a7 checkmate, because the bishop is pinned to the king, so the queen can give a check on a7. And there are different ways for Ivanchuk to do something about this. He can play bishop c8 in this position, but then rook takes c8, and if queen takes b6 now, then a takes b6, king b7, and rook takes h8, and this is losing too much material for Ivanchuk. Another possibility was queen takes b6, then a takes with check, bishop a6 is forced, and rook takes h8. And again, Kasparov is a rook up and has a very strong position. And of course, the most obvious move probably rook takes e8 if, of course, fails to queen takes h6. So it's very logical that since the rook cannot take on e8 because the queen would be hanging, Ivanchuk, of course, removes his queen with check, and king f1 followed, and then Ivanchuk cannot take the rook still, because rook takes e8 would lead to a mate after a6. And for example, bishop takes a6, bishop d5 check, rook takes, and queen c6 checkmate. There are different mating patterns in some of the lines following here. So rook takes e8 won't work, so Ivanchuk found a tactical way out of this. He played queen takes g2 check, king takes, and d4, which is actually a very nice try from Ivanchuk. And if now Kasparov had played, for example, king f1, then rook takes e8, a6, bishop f3, there might be some counterplay for Ivanchuk. So after d4 check, Kasparov did the right thing. He gave his queen back, taking on b7, and rook takes b7, and rook takes h8, and rook takes b5. And after all the complications, Kasparov is up the exchange, and with this his dangerous pass pawn on a5, he has a winning position. And game continued only for a few moves. a6, king a7, rook f8, rook takes b2, rook takes f7 with check, king a8, a7, c3, and rook f8. Ivanchuk loses his bishop and will soon be checkmate, so he decided to resign here. He could, instead of c3, have tried to giving up the bishop for the a pawn, but the two white rooks will be able to control those three pass pawns here. So this is also winning for Kasparov. So it was c3 and rook f8, and I think this was a brilliant game with a lot of tactics from both sides right from the start of the game. and with this fantastic rook e8 move from Kasparov as the icing on the cake. I hope you enjoyed this Kasparov performance from Linares 1994, and I hope to see you on my blog at klausjensen.com. Bye bye for now.